You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J T Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
J T Ellison.
At the end of the show, we're going to have an audiobook excerpt from Richard Fox's The Ember War. This audio clip is narrated by the one and only Luke Daniels. You're going to love this series. I love it so much. And Richard has been a great supporter and sponsor of the show, and we're going to show him some love. Listen to the audiobook excerpt. You're going to love it. And be sure to go to audible.com to purchase it. If you're not an Audible subscriber, you can get a free book just by signing up for a free trial at audibletrial.com/Hank. You get a 30-day free trial. You get the free book. If you decide to cancel your Audible subscription, you get to keep the free book, and it doesn't cost you a single penny. audibletrial.com/Hank, and listen after the show for the clip from Richard Fox. Writers, I have an amazing tool to tell you about. A revolutionary writing tool for planning stories. Campfire Pro is what novelists need to go from the seed of an idea to a detailed plan that's ready to be executed. Complete your character design, create a timeline, and track your world building all in one place with our downloadable desktop app for Mac and PC. Without the annoying subscription model so many apps are using today. Visit campfiretechnology.com for special holiday pricing on Campfire Pro today. Who Wants to Love a Billionaire? Billionaires in New York, Book 1 by Laura Burton. Do you have a favorite writer whose books are auto-buys for you? Wouldn't you love for readers to have you on their auto-buy list, then recommend your books to their friends and on social media? The good news is there are subtle things you can do, things that are nearly invisible to the reader, that will make your stories unputdownable. The Beyond 10 Days course from Victory Editing can help you get the most from your stories and help you build that relationship with readers through your writing. This course is full of awesome, and best of all, you don't have to fly across the country or put on pants. In this course, we'll focus on avoiding info dumps, dialogue mechanics, show versus tell in dialogue, carrying show versus tell forward to your narrative, deepening your point of view and strengthening your protagonist's voice, overwriting and how to avoid it. 10 hours of video content with text and audio downloads. Shine that diamond. Join me at the Beyond 10 Days course. Go to hankgarner.com and click the banner to sign up today. The Forsaken Mercenary series by Jonathan Yanez, a near-future thriller series, is now available on audible.com. The series that readers have loved is now available in your favorite format, audiobook format. The first book is called Drop Ship in the Forsaken Mercenary series. If they can't control him, they'll try and kill him. Daniel Hunt is the deadliest mercenary in the galaxy if he can just remember. 5 years before, he woke up with nothing more than his name. Now his present is on a violent collision with his past and the future of the galaxy. The Earth is dead. Humanity is taken to the Moon and Mars to have a chance. On what's left of Earth, primal gangs war for dominance. A rebel force will discover a weapon of unimaginable strength the wealthy in the galaxy will do anything to possess. As Daniel unravels the origin of his past, he'll realize he's not the same weapon he once was. But does redemption exist for someone like him? For fans of Jason Bourne and the Weapon X program, this one's for you. Grab your hand cannon and start listening now. The Forsaken Mercenary series, Book 1 Drop Ship, available on audible.com now from Jonathan Yanez. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am super excited to have my friend J T Ellison back on the show with me. JT is one of my favorite mystery writers, and she has a fantastic new book. It's called Good Girls Lie, And it's been out for a couple of weeks now, well, a little over a month now. And guys, let me tell you what, if you're looking for a great book to keep you on the edge of your nerves in this new year, as if we need more of that, JT's new book is fantastic. You're going to love it. Welcome back to the show, JT.
Thank you. It's so good to be back.
Thank you. So it's been about a year and a half or so since we talked. You've had a lot going on. How's mystery writing in 2020?
Is it sad that it feels like we talked last week?
I know.
That tells you about how things are. A year and a half, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Time just flies when you're having fun, right? Having fun with people. It's all good.
It does. Your books are mystery thrillers, and you kind of you know what to expect from a J T Ellison book, and you've got some great recurring characters like Samantha Owens, who we all love. And then you've got the series that you write with Catherine Coulter, and those are fantastic. The new book, Good Girls Lie, is a little bit of a not a departure. There's a subtle shift. Let me put it that way in the tone of this book. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of what was going through your head when you started this project?
Sure. So I've written a number of series and had a great time doing it, but I moved over into the more standalone suspense realm a few years ago. So this is my fourth standalone now. And I think I'm finally starting to hit my stride in this particular genre. The tone and the voice and everything is, I really like this avenue that I'm going down. I'm glad that the tone and the voice are working because I had to change them at the last minute. I had to go back to the beginning of this book and rewrite it in first person. And that was terrifying for me. I've never written a full book in first person. And it still does have some third person chapters because I don't think I'll ever be able to let that go. But the main character is first person, and it terrified me, to be frank. It really genuinely terrified me.
What do you think was so scary about it? Is it that the constraints that you put on yourself by going first person? Is it having to feel more connected to the character in first person? What was it, do you think, that scared you so much?
Well, for this book in particular, I used a setting that I had lived, which is the private girls' school. This is set in high school. I went to a private boarding college for all women. And I was really, I think, worried that so many of my experiences were going to take over the characters, and that didn't happen. So that's fine. It wasn't a problem in the end. But when I was writing it, I was, very cognizant of not letting my own voice break through into ashes and to let her experience these things firsthand for the first time, rather than it being in the shroud of memory, if that makes any sense.
Well, how do you take your experiences and then update them for a little bit younger protagonist and cast than maybe you were, and also the times have changed, the technology's changed, the school and our interactions have changed. How do you get yourself in that mindset for this book?
Well, it's that's not hard for me. I approached it just like I do any research for any book. Even though I've lived it, it has changed, and the school's gone co-ed, and the buildings have been updated, and suddenly it's not the place that I was. So that made it a little bit easier. The people that are there may not recognize some of the things because the school has changed so much. The characters. With the technology that has come along, that was really the biggest challenge with this, because I didn't want to be fighting the cell phone. I didn't think a 400-page book with a bunch of girls in school looking at their hands was going to be really exciting. So I banned cell phones, and that made life so much easier because they had to actually interact. And and then the cell phone can be an illicit thing, and it just worked really well. And thankfully, a number of schools have started doing that. So anybody that pushed back and said there's no way you can separate a teenage girl from her cell phone, it's like, well, that's not entirely true.
Right.
You know, you
well,
actually,
and you also remove tools from the characters by taking away their cell phone. You know, so many problems could be solved, or at least, interventions could happen with the presence of a cell phone, and you took that away from them, which is brilliant.
well, and that's the problem modern fiction writers are faced with. If you're writing a modern story, how do you not just pick up the phone and get the answer? Because it's so, you can just look it up. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. The DNA tests take 2 days now instead of 2 months. Everything is moving along so quickly that we're having to adapt to this new environment. I think that's why so many are just going to historicals, because it's so much easier not to be able to have the answer given to you 10 minutes away. All the books would end in the second chapter.
Right. Well, this story also is very much in your head. I've been trying to think of a way to describe this. There's a psychological suspense is really popular now, and for good reason. We want to know what makes people tick and what makes people think, and this book has all of that, and the kind of deep dive into the craziness that we all carry around with us. When you first decided to start working on this book, what was that initial idea? What was that kernel that then grew into this book? So
I was watching on Sunday morning, as I am wont to do with my husband, International House Hunters, which is one of our favorite shows. Pardon me. And we're watching the show, and the couple were moving to Surrey, England, for the father to teach at an all-girls boarding school. And they showed the school in the opening. It's this beautiful red brick campus. And I looked over at my husband, I'm like, I have always wanted to write a boarding school mystery. I've always wanted to use Macon as the backdrop, and he says, well, why don't you do that? No, in the midst of 1,000 other projects that I have going on. So I ended up, I made a little blog post about it actually and said, gosh, wouldn't that be fun? And I was working on a Catherine book at the time, so I didn't have time to even really exercise it. But, I made myself a little file with the notes and, here's the impetus of the idea, and moved on. And then I was going to take some time off between finishing the next Catherine book and doing my next of my own. And all the scheduling changed, and I ended up having a couple of months free. And so I put this in and wrote it really fast based on, I already had that cooking in the back of my head for several months, all the different things. So that's where it came from. Gotcha. So the school that this takes place in is the Goode School, Goode, right. And the title is a great play on that, because good girls don't lie, good, right. With an E. They're not supposed to. But good girls lie, right? You're not supposed to. Tell us the setup of this book. Who are these girls, and what do they find themselves in? So, Goode is I guess it's about 150-year-old school in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia that was started by a nun who was taking in wayward girls, the girls that got themselves in trouble. And once they had their babies, then she either got them into service or in some cases even managed to reinsert them in society without a stain on their honor. She ends up having her own illegitimate child, and the father of that child gives her a huge endowment, and she buys the school. She renames it Goode because all girls in her mind were good. And she starts a teacher's college from it. And that turns into its modern day version, which is an exceptionally elite school. only the best of the best. It's called a silent Ivy because all the girls there can write their ticket to any school they want to go to. They want into Harvard, they get into Harvard. They get into Harvard in their junior year, not early admission senior year. I mean, this is the ticket to ride for everybody there. Ash Carlisle is the main character of this book. She is from Oxford, England. She has, as the book opens, found herself in a terrible position. Her parents have just died. She's an orphan. It was a murder-suicide, very scandalous event back in England. And she is just trying to start over. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. She doesn't want to go, but she's out of opportunities at this point. So she lands on the shores of Goode in Marchburg and is taken under the wing of Dean Westhaven, who is, I believe, the 10th in a matriarchal line of deans that go back to the nun who started the school in the first place. And the dean has her own problems. So everything's going pretty good until people start to die. And then Ash, I wanted to do a story where a teenage girl went from revered to reviled. And that's exactly what happens to her.
Goode, the school is really, a character in the book. And the rich history of it, it's so interesting to me to see how the story starts unfolding and to realize these generational connections that this place has, and how these themes and these the things that go all the way back to its founding kind of come up over and over again. Was when you started really working on Goode and how the place and the character of the place is going to play into the story. How much fun was that to work on the place?
Oh, it was fantastic because, that is the part that I knew. I knew the setting cold. Now, the setting is an amalgamation of a number of different places. It's got a lot of Randolph-Macon Women's College in it. It also has Chapel Hill, North Carolina. It's got the quad from Chapel Hill, the sundial from Chapel Hill, and the arboretum from Chapel Hill. There are some elements from Hampton, Sydney. There's elements from Woodbury Forest. There's elements from W&L, from Sweetbriar. I took basically the I-29 corridor schools and dumped them into a melting pot and brought Chapel Hill in. And that gave me my setting. And that was, a lot of fun to write. I pulled a lot of the old ghost stories that I had heard and experienced while I was in school, and a lot of the longing that I know these are teenagers, but they're very sophisticated teenagers. But Dean Westhaven is not. She's taken over the school for her mother, who has botched a murder investigation into one of their students, and the PR nightmare got out of hand and she had to resign. Ford had to take over the school at 25. She's been there 10 years. She doesn't want to be the dean of this school. She wants to be a writer. And the scenes with her staring out the window at the Blue Ridge, thinking about having a writing life, having a creative life. I mean, that's just me. That was what I spent my time there doing, was trying to hone my skills as a writer so that I could go out in the world and live a creative life. So this is a really personal book. And that's another reason why the first person was so dangerous for me. I didn't want this to be me. This isn't a memoir. This is a novel. So it does have a lot of me in it, though, for sure.
This book is so twisty and, it keeps you guessing at every chapter. And I love that so much. I don't want to be 4 chapters in and think, oh, I know exactly where JT's going with this, because that's no fun. Who wants to do that? I know that you are a big fan of writing craft books, like a lot of writers are, and we love to study other writers and figure out, how they do what they do. And I know we talked last time that you're a big fan of Stephen King's book on writing, but also you study a lot of books, and you've said on our show, and I've heard you say in other places, that you also study books. And I'm trying to remember the one particular one, How to Write a Blockbuster.
Oh, the Al Zuckerman book.
Yeah, Al Zuckerman. Thank you. Which is heavy on outlining. and getting the story, planned out ahead of time. And we know, if anyone has read On Writing, Stephen King is so anti, outlining that, he would probably, bust your knuckles for it. But how do you resolve those two? And, as someone who writes such twisty books, do you have a plan going into it? And how do you reconcile those two schools of thought of the freedom of free writing and the spontaneity that brings with the ability to control every aspect of the story by plotting it?
I hate outlining. I read that Zuckerman book to learn how to outline, and I came out of it having more hives than I had going in at the idea of outlining. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Sometimes it's a little bit necessary. The books that I wrote with Catherine, we obviously have to outline those because there's two of us in two brains, and you need to know what's happening and where things are going. But I can't write an outline and stick to it. It's a massive frustration for me. I wish I could. I mean, I really wish I could. You would think it would make life go easier. But every time I outline a book, I get blocked. I just get blocked. I have no idea why that is when I know what's happening next, that I come to the page and I'm like, ugh, I know what's happening next. And that's part of it for me. The ending up in a place in the afternoon, which when you sat down in the morning, you have no idea you're going to be there. That's the magic of writing to me. Outlining kills the magic dead. And I think it shows in my work that when I outline things, I just don't particularly care for the story. And I end up deviating immediately from it. Once I'm just I'm a gardener, I like to plant things and just let them go wild and see what happens. It makes life so much easier. So anybody that tells you that there is only one way to do this, you have to outline, or no, you can do whatever works for you.
Exactly. And the thing that I appreciate is I collect tools, and sometimes this tool works in this space. Maybe I'm kind of written myself into a corner. Maybe I need to sit down and get a piece of paper and chart it out to figure out how to get out of this. But sometimes, one thing that I've noticed is, everyone hates writing that mushy middle. A lot of people usually have some great ideas for the beginning of a story and a catalyst to really set it off. A lot of times we'll have a great resolution that we're writing toward, but that middle, tying those things together can be a chore sometimes. And sometimes when outlining, when you're in that middle spot, it's just so blatant that, okay, now I'm at that middle spot. I've got to write through this. Where if you're gardening, you get through there and you discover new possibilities as you go. And maybe that's part of it for me, that I can't see the parts I hate coming up. Therefore, I just figure it out as I go.
That's funny. Well, I don't believe in saggy middles. I refuse to have them. I refuse to write them. And I do that by having 4 turns instead of 3. And that gives me like Act 1, Act 1.5, Act 2, and Act 3. And that eliminates that. That means no matter what's happening in the middle of the book, you've got 2 turns instead of 1. And that kind of breaks it free. That normal 3-act structure, I think it's hard not to have a saggy middle.
Yeah, I agree. Because that second act generally is about 60% of the book when you write it that way. Right. There's just a lot of area to droop and drag in there.
There really is. There really is.
Yeah. Since switching your focus to standalone thrillers and as opposed to the series, do you feel like one provides what do you think that, since you now on your 4th standalone, how do you feel that this type of story is better for what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, it's harder. I'll give you that. I don't know if better is the right word. It's harder because you
don't have a built world to begin with.
You have to create a brand new world. The series, you already have the world, you already have the people, you already have the construct, and you have to have a killer plot to make a series novel work over and over and over again. It's all about revisiting a beloved character and putting them in a totally untenuous situation. The problem is, after millions of books in a series, I mean, how many times can you put that character in the untenuous situation, right? The standalone eliminates that because every character gets to face this massive challenge, and it doesn't strain credulity as much to have the same thing going over and over and over again. That said, I love writing series, and I'm certainly not done with, Taylor and Sam. I'm going to come back to that. The Catherine series is finished. We wrapped that at 6 books because sometimes there's just nowhere else for the characters to go because it does start to strain credulity. That's an interesting example of, that series was done. It was finished. So, I really love being able to create a brand new environment, populate it how I want. I want to write fantasy one of these days because, then all the bets are off, right? You're not bound by any construct, but anything that you create yourself. But that takes a certain skill and mindset that I don't know that I have. I think I might have to.
I think you'd be fantastic at it. I think it'd be great. The stakes are definitely higher, on a standalone, aren't they? I think a great example that's kind of top of mind when we're recording this is, like Lee Child's, Jack Reacher. We love Jack Reacher. God love him and Lee Child, but we know that Jack Reacher is never going to die in a Jack Reacher book because we know that next year there's going to be another Reacher book. So we can't do anything to Reacher. Now he finds plenty of other ways to keep us, on the hook, but we know that Reacher is, at the end of the day, he may be bloodied and battered and bruised, but he'll skulk away, he'll heal up, and he'll be back next time. To the point that, Lee Child has, said he's retiring from writing and he's turning over, that if he were ever wanting to have the demise of Jack Reacher, that would be the time, but he's turning it over to another writer. But with a standalone, you don't have those constraints. You can do anything to anyone.
All bets are off. And I think that's why they're having such a heyday right now, because there's so much uncertainty in the world. The series books have their place and people love them. And that's great for us. But I think that people are really attracted to chaos. And that's what these standalone novels are. They're just chaos. There's no telling what's going to happen. And in the hands of a sophisticated writer, you can really get taken on a ride. And that's my job. That's what I'm trying to accomplish every time I sit down to the page. I want to take you on a ride. Sometimes that can be paralyzing.
Well, we see chaos in the real world every day, and we're living in this crazy chaos world. But there's something reassuring about sitting down with a story of chaos that someone is sort of holding our hand through, and that we can make some sense of the chaos in the world through story. And that's the beautiful thing of story.
It absolutely is. That's why I think we read in the first place, is to make sense of our world around us. Writers are social commentators. That's our job. There's been a disturbing trend lately of people, not being able to do that kind of social commentary. And that's scary because that's the history of time. That's what writers are there for, to shine a light on inequality, to shine a light on all the different crazy, weird things that happen in the world. And, that's a lofty goal for anyone to have, I think, but that's what we're trying to do. And I think readers love that, and they know what they're going to get when they sit down with a novel. And that's why they read novels. They want to be transported. They want to have horrible things happen to other people. So they're experiencing them, but they're doing it in a safe way. So that's, it's an interesting kind of format.
You have done some of the best author interviews. I love the interviews that you do. How important is it to you for your creative life to stay connected with other creative people, other writers, to talk shop a little bit and to, maybe bounce ideas off, but more importantly, to just kind of, connect with people and to speak the language that only creative people get to speak to one another.
It's incredibly important. I mean, I'm so far into this that I sometimes find myself talking with non-writers and saying, thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what do I even have to contribute to this conversation? So I don't understand the life outside of the creative world anymore. And if you don't read and you don't write, well, if you don't read, I really have a difficult time talking with you because, oh my God, what are we going to talk about? I mean, books are my blood. Without them, I would literally shrivel up. I have to have that kind of influx, which is really funny because my husband is not a fiction reader. He'll read a few fiction novels. He reads mine, but he's a nonfiction guy. So that's, sometimes we'll be sitting there at night having these really weird conversations, trying to mesh the fictional world and the nonfiction world. But that's, where a lot of good ideas come from. But it's hugely important to stoke the creative fires by talking with other creatives. I came up in a vacuum. I didn't know that there were organizations for writers. I didn't know there were awards for writers. People just wrote books. I went to the library and checked them out, or I went to the grocery store and found the thickest one I could and bought it. I didn't read a specific genre. I didn't read specific authors. I mean, there were authors that anytime I saw one of their books, I grabbed. But that I was able to even write the first couple of books in this vacuum is kind of miraculous. And it wasn't until I started talking to other people. I went to a signing. I met some people who invited me to a critique group. I learned about Sisters in Crime. And all of a sudden, this whole world opened. And I think I'll never forget that moment of realizing that, hey, I have found my place. And I want to share that with other people. And I want them to have a little look behind the curtain. It's funny that you bring this up today because I read something last week that was so disconcerting to me that the readers don't care about the writer's process. They just want the book. And that's the complete opposite of the experience that I've had over the past 15 years. I did a poll on my blog and it's 98% want to hear about the writing process. It's fascinating to people.
Oh, yeah. Half of our audience are writers. The other half are readers. And everyone loves how the sausage is made. It's crazy. And I think it's because, most people, there's this storytelling gene inside of us. And some people it awakens earlier than others. But I think everyone feels like they have a book inside them. Sure. If you really got them to talk honestly, people love to tell stories. That's why we're human. We all want to connect to this magic that is storytelling.
Right. And I mean, even if you don't read, you do absorb story. You absorb it in TV. You absorb it in the news. It is what connects all of us is story. How you prefer your coffee is up to you, right? It's totally up to you. But it is something that just is so intrinsically important to everything. And, I dig it. But there's also, you say about how to make the sausage. The thing is, none of us can really explain how the sausage is made. It's sort of a magic little, cauldron bubbling in our heads of random voices talking to us. I read, there was a Medium piece last week by a guy who realized that not everybody has internal monologue, and he just doesn't know how to process that. And I don't either. How do people not have an internal monologue? And he had a couple of friends who were like, oh, well, if I need to have a conversation with myself, I do it out loud in the mirror. It's like, whoa, can you imagine? I can't imagine the voices not talking to me, but that's probably why I'm a writer. That's magic. Controlled psychosis, call it what you will.
Well, that's why this episode is going to be episode number 807, I think, and we're still trying to figure out, where stories come from, much less how you do it.
Sure. I mean, I don't think we'll ever be able to truly answer that. It's something in our souls, and everybody is different and unique, and they're going to have their own view of the world. And, we've all agreed that green is green and gray is gray and trees are trees. It's the whole Plato's cave thing, if you want to get really philosophical about it. But it's, we're coming from a commonality of story.
Yeah. Well, the new book is called Good Girls Lie. It is amazing. It's out everywhere now in Kindle edition, audiobook, which I highly recommend. And then it's out in trade paperback, right?
Trade paperback and hardcover. It's simultaneous
and
release in all formats.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's hard to tell sometimes with Amazon because sometimes hardcover, there'll be library hardcovers, but they still list those. But that's excellent.
Yeah, it's a library, library hardcover. But that, if you prefer hardcover books, that's what they'll send you.
Excellent. Well, there's links to it in the show notes of this episode. JT, what are you working on now? Because I know when this book is out, you've got another one brewing.
Yeah, the other one should have been done by now, but it's not. I'm behind. I ended up having a couple of knee surgeries this year, and it really threw me for a loop creatively. So I'm still clawing my way back, but I'm working on something, and it's called Her Dark Lies. And I mean, it's about a destination wedding gone dramatically wrong, which is basically the theme of every book that I've ever written. Something happens and it goes dramatically wrong.
My oldest daughter is getting married this fall, and so we are all into wedding planning and stuff. So yeah, that's either going to be amazing or terrifying when the book comes out. We'll see.
I don't have a ton of experience with it. I only have done it once, and I planned the entire wedding in a month, and then we sat there for 6 months waiting for the day to come. It was different than it is now. We had easier choices.
Oh, it's an event now,
yeah.
I'll tell you. So it's crazy. It's crazy. JT's always fun to catch up and chat and talk writing. I love everything that you're doing. We're going to send everyone to pick up Good Girls Lie. This is a must for everyone's bookshelf. JT, tell everyone where they can find you online if they want to dig into your back catalog and all the awesome stuff.
Oh, that would be fantastic. So I am at jtellison.com. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Thriller Chick. I have a Facebook group called The Literati, and that has links on the front page. I have a monthly newsletter that has all kinds of fun tidbits and book recommendations and recipes. And I have a weekly blog. Yeah, how many more things can I do? And I have a TV show called A Word on Words that you can find at awordonwords.org. Yeah, lots of balls in the air, but having a blast doing it.
Love it. We'll put links to all of that great stuff in the show notes of this episode. JT, thank you so much for taking time to come back on the show.
Thank you for having me. I always love our conversations.
Stay tuned now for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Fox's The Ember War.
The near future. Humanity's only hope of survival entered the solar system at nearly the speed of light. The probe slowed as the sun's heliosphere disrupted the graviton wave it rode in on from the abyss of deep space. Awakened by the sudden deceleration, the probe absorbed the electromagnetic spectrum utilized by its target species and assessed the technological sophistication of the sole sentient species on Earth. The probe adjusted its course to take it into the system's primary. If the humans couldn't survive, with its help, what was to come, then the probe would annihilate itself. There would be no trace of it for the enemy, and no chance of humanity's existence beyond the time it had until the enemy arrived. The probe analyzed filed patents, military expenditures, birth rates, mathematical advancement, and space exploration. The first assessment fell within the margin of error of survival and extinction for humanity. The probe's programming allowed for limited autonomous decision-making, choice being a rare luxury for the probe's class of artificial intelligence. The probe found itself in a position to choose between ending its mission in the sun's fire and a mathematically improbable defense of humanity, and the potential compromise of its much larger mission. Given the rare opportunity to make its own decision, the probe opted to dither. In the week it took to pass into Jupiter's orbit, the probe took in more data. It scoured the internet for factors to add to the assessment, but the assessment remained the same. Unlikely, but possible. By the time it shot past Mars, the probe still hadn't made a decision. As the time to adjust course for Earth or continue into the Sun approached, the probe conducted a final scan of cloud storage servers for any new information, and found something interesting. While the new information made only a negligible impact on the assessment, the probe adjusted course to Earth. It hadn't traveled all this way for nothing. In the desert south of Phoenix, Arizona, it landed with no more fanfare than a slight thump and a few startled cows. Then it broke into the local cell network and made a call. Mark Ibarra awoke to his phone ringing at max volume, playing a pop ditty that he hated with vehemence. He rolled off the mattress that lay on the floor and crawled on his hands and knees to where his cell was recharging. His roommate, who paid the majority of their rent and got to sleep on an actual bed, grumbled and let off a slew of slurred insults. Mark reached his cell and slapped at it until the offending music ended. He blinked sleep from his eyes and tried to focus on the caller's name on the screen. The only people who'd call at this ungodly hour were his family in Basque country, or maybe Jessica in his applied robotics course wanted a late-night study break. The name on the screen was Answer Me. He closed an eye and reread the name. It was way too early, or too late, depending on one's point of view, for this nonsense. He turned the ringer off and went back to bed. Sleep was about to claim him when the phone rang again, just as loudly as last time, but now with a disco anthem. "Seriously?" his roommate slurred. Mark declined the call and powered the phone off. He flopped back on his bed and curled into his blanket. To hell with my first class, he thought. Arizona State University had a lax attendance policy, one which he'd abused for nights like this. The cell erupted with big band music. Mark took his head out from beneath the covers and looked at his phone like it was a thing possessed. The phone vibrated so hard that it practically danced a jig on the floor, and the screen flashed Answer Me over and over again as music blared. "Dude," said his roommate, now sitting up in his bed. Mark swiped the phone off the charging cord, and the music stopped. The caller's name undulated with a rainbow of colors, and an arrow appeared on the screen, pointing to the button he had to press to answer the call. When did I get this app? He thought. Mark sighed and left the bedroom, meandering into the hallway bathroom with the grace of a zombie. The battered mattress he slept on played hell with his back and left him stiff every morning. Dropping his boxers, he took a seat on the toilet and answered the call, determined to return this caller's civility with some interesting background noise. "What?" he murmured. "Mark Ibarra. I need to see you." The voice was mechanical, asexual in its monotone. "Do you have any friggin' idea what time it is? Wait, who the hell is this?" "You must come to me immediately. We must discuss the mathematical proof you have stored in document title This Can't Be Right. Doc. Mark shot to his feet. The boxers around his ankles tripped him up, and he stumbled out of the bathroom and fell against the wall. His elbow punched a hole in the drywall, and the cell clattered to the floor. He scooped the phone back up and struggled to breathe as a sudden asthma attack came over him. How? He couldn't finish his question until he found his inhaler in the kitchen, mere steps away in the tiny apartment. He took a deep breath from the inhaler and felt the tightness leave his lungs. That someone knew of his proof was impossible. He'd finished it earlier that night and had encrypted it several times before loading it into a cloud file that shouldn't have been linked to him in any way. "How do you know about that?" he asked. "You must come to me immediately. There is little time. Look at your screen," the robotic voice said. His screen changed to a map program, displaying a pin in an open field just off the highway, connecting Phoenix to the suburb of Maricopa. "Come. Now." Mark grabbed his keys. An hour later, his jeans ripped from scaling a barbed wire fence, Mark was surrounded by desert scrub. The blue of the morning rose behind him, where his beat-up Honda waited on the side of the highway. With his cell to his ear, Mark stopped and looked around before deciding how to continue. Spiked ocotillo plants looked a lot like benign mesquite trees in the darkness. A Native American casino in the distance served as his North Star, helping him keep his bearings. "You're not out here, are you? I'm being punked, aren't I?" he asked the mysterious caller. "You are 9.26 meters to my east-southeast. Punk, decayed wood, used as tinder. Are you on fire?" the caller said. Mark rolled his eyes. This wasn't the first time the caller had used the non-standard meanings of words during what passed as conversation between the two. Mark had tried to get the caller to explain how he knew about his theorem and why they had to meet in the middle of the desert. The caller had refused to say anything. He would only reiterate that Mark had to come quickly to see him, chiding him every time Mark deviated from the provided driving directions. "If you're so close, why can't I see you?" he asked. He took a few steps in what he thought was a northwesterly direction and squished into a cow patty.